Tonight on Bridge City News, as the weather heats up, so does the risk of skin cancer. We chat with a skin cancer survivor who has advice on how to best protect yourself. Evacuees from the high-level wildfires are still waiting for compensation from the province. And we have reaction to the Alberta government's potential youth wage rollback from $15 to $13 an hour.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. The City of Lethbridge is hosting an emergency social services exercise. ESS is the group of individuals that would open a reception centre to care for evacuees. BCN's Loris Alexander reports on the simulation.
The tabletop exercise planned for 6 hours at the University of Lethbridge was limited to discussion with some functional elements.
Within the city, we have a program called the Emergency Social Services Team, or ESS. This is a group of city employees that partners with other groups like the Red Cross, the Lethbridge Police Victim Services Unit to provide for the needs of evacuees if we have an incident. That's setting up a reception center, providing food, clothing, lodging, and anything else that might be needed. Today we're simulating getting evacuees from BC, which was a reality last year. The province had actually asked if we could potentially take anyone in from the BC wildfires last year. It didn't pan out. Luckily, it worked out better in their favor, so they didn't require our services, but we're practicing that today just in case that did happen. What would happen if we did get an influx of 400 or so evacuees from BC? How do we take care of them and how do we meet their needs? Things like pets, medications, vulnerable sector populations, we need to be ready for it all.
Some of the participating organizations were the Canadian Red Cross Society, Coaldale Fire and Emergency Services, and the University of Lethbridge.
It's important to be prepared at an organizational level as well as a community member level. So here we're preparing for evacuations, setting up a reception center in case we ever get people from other provinces or even within the province in an emergency situation.
The purpose of the exercise is to identify challenges which should be anticipated during an evacuation event. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
The UCP government says it has distributed more than $4.2 million in emergency payments to people driven from their homes by the devastating Northern Alberta wildfires. Many evacuees, however, say they're still waiting for their preloaded debit cards. Each adult evacuee is entitled to a one-time payment of $1,250, while children will receive $500. The fire has grown to over 130,000 hectares and is still considered out of control. Crews, however, are continuing to make progress on a fire break around the perimeter of the community. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, says Federal Environment Minister Catherine McKenna is laying the blame of the Alberta wildfires on Alberta Premier Jason Kenney. Brian says that's simply not fair.
This year is a tough year for Northern Alberta, but for her to turn around and try and lay the blame for this on Jason Kenney's opposition to the carbon tax is nothing short of political posturing, of overheated rhetoric, of trying to smear your opponents and scare people. And quite frankly, you know, I've covered Catherine McKenna for a long time now. Quite frankly, it's beneath her.
Brian will also discuss the chances of former Liberal MPs Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott being re-elected now that they're running as independents. That's coming up later in our show. Alberta has introduced legislation to cut corporate income taxes by a third over the next few years. Bill 3, if passed, will see our province's corporate rate cut by 1 percentage point July 1st, making it the lowest in Canada. The rate would be reduced by the same amount on the first day of the following 3 years, leaving it at 8% by the year 2020. U of L economist Richard Mueller says it's difficult to predict whether or not the cuts will have much of an impact.
I think it depends. I mean, again, if their projections are optimistic, of course, if there's a bunch of employment being created, and the tax revenues from that employment could certainly make up for the decline in, the tax rate from, the corporate tax rate from 12 to 8%. That remains to be seen. So, of course, if they don't somehow manage to replace those corporate revenues because of the reduced rate, they could be in for a decline in spending in other areas as well. So it remains to be seen, basically.
The government says the move will help kickstart the economy and create a minimum of 55,000 jobs. The opposition NDP says it will leave a big revenue shortfall that will hurt both healthcare and education. Alberta is cutting the minimum wage for youth workers from $15 to $13 an hour. It's part of the UCP's Open for Business Act, which will potentially take effect on June 26th. Video journalist Naveen Day visited Lethbridge College and a local employer to hear concerns from both sides of the issue.
A $13 an hour minimum wage for youth workers aged 13 to 17 may kick in as early as next month, and some students at Lethbridge Collegiate are not happy.
I think it's kind of unfair because most people will be doing the same exact job and be paid less for something they're doing the exact same job of.
I work at 2 different places currently because I'm trying to save up for schooling, and even the minimum wage how it is now still isn't enough for me to be able to be successful in my future career path.
I actually think it's a good thing because I've tried for about 2 years now to get a part-time job, and I was unable to because most employers seem to only hire people who are older than that because they think they're more deserving of that wage that they've worked their way up to.
The youth wage, which is part of the Open for Business Act, would apply to youth under the age of 18 who work 28 hours or less a week. While most young people feel the wage is unfair, Tim Rempel, owner of several Booster Juice locations, says the youth wage returns a stolen opportunity back to young workers.
We're a franchise, as a lot of small business owners are. We don't control our pricing. The pricing is set by the main office, and sometimes that pricing may not adjust as quickly as the minimum wage was going up. So we saw some drastic decreases in profitability. We saw some very much changes that we had to do operationally. I'm really hoping that this change helps the youth market, employment market, that there's, because we've noticed, and stats prove this out, that the youth market has been drastically affected by the increase of minimum wage. I have stacks of resumes at all of our stores of people aged 15 to 20 looking for work.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says youth workers will still be making more at $13 than adults in many other provinces. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
The teen years can be a confusing and challenging time for many youth, but when you add to the mixed cultural differences and language barriers, it can add even more frustration. According to Lethbridge Immigration Services, mental health issues like depression and anxiety are common among new immigrant children. Just recently, a Syrian youth in Calgary took her own life, devastating the immigrant community in Alberta. Immigrant Services has a team in place that works specifically with youth to make sure this doesn't happen again.
I know how incredibly badly anybody involved in that family's journey must feel right now. And we all bear that pain because it could have happened here, it could have happened anywhere. And what it does, in order for us to learn from it, is just make us even more zealous about ensuring that people understand how damaging bullying can be, how damaging racism and discrimination is to a person who's trying to live with that label. So it's awareness, service, education.
According to Stats Canada, 24% of deaths in people aged 15 to 24 are caused by suicide. And just a reminder that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. As the weather in southern Alberta heats up, so does your risk of skin cancer. According to the Canadian Skin Cancer Foundation, over 80,000 cases are diagnosed in Canada each and every year. We spoke with one man who has endured a series of painful surgeries and shared ways in which you can protect yourself from going through the same thing.
There's an accumulation that you don't see. A tan isn't worth it. To do the damage to your body, I mean, if you're going out, you know, and you're going to be in the sun, put sunscreen on. It's not worth it. A tan will fade, but scars don't fade. And wearing the proper hat, you know, wide brim, depending on what I'm doing. I'm outside a lot in the summer, so yeah, even to walk around the block, it isn't something that I go without a hat.
The foundation says Canadians born in the 1990s have 2 to 3 times higher risk of developing skin cancer. Some great news for Jeopardy host Alex Trebek. The 78-year-old received news from doctors that he's in near remission as he continues treatment for stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Trebek recently said that his response to chemotherapy has been kind of mind-boggling, and some tumors have shrunk by more than 50%. If you're looking for something fun to do that won't cost you anything, the Southern Alberta Art Gallery is waiving their fee now through June 19th. The walls in their gallery are covered with about 300 exhibits created by kindergarten through grade 12 students from Lethbridge School District number 51. According to SAG, this is a great way to celebrate some of the outstanding talent in our community.
It's a really great reminder of how art can really change people's lives in a very simple way. And there's a little bit of magic in every single piece that's in here. the kids feel special. They're not really aware of the magnitude of the celebration until they come to the gallery, but a lot of the high school students are like stellar. They're really amazing because they're really trying to focus in on what their passions are, and especially at that time in your life. You know, you remember when you were in high school and how art provided you a kind of solace from life and changes and all of the things that you're going through with your friends and family. So it's a really great way to have a collection in one room that is so full of emotion.
SAG will also be holding a number of summer art camps for kids ages 6 through 10 beginning in July. More information can be found on our website, bridgecitynews.ca. The Runners Soul Race Association is hosting their 14th annual Little Souls Kids Marathon, 6:30 today at the Chinook High School field. Organizers say it's a fun way of helping to promote an active lifestyle.
I'm very passionate about running and sport in general, and the Little Souls Kids Marathon offers us a chance to expose kids to running at a young age and kind of give them a chance to experience it. And it's a cheap sport. You can do it pretty much anywhere and any time. So with the kids getting out, building up some mileage in preparation for race night, I know that the schools in the city have been very supportive, so they do some of their runs with their schools, but also at home with family and friends. So it's pretty cool to see all the variety of ways that they can get out and enjoy some activity on their own and with others.
The run is open to kids age 12 and under. The University of Lethbridge will celebrate the achievements of 1,347 students as they cross the stage at the Spring Convocation Ceremony tomorrow and Friday. The ceremonies begin at 9:30 a.m. both days. Lieutenant Governor Lois Mitchell will be there to present a Social Studies Education Award. Other highlights include a Distinguished Teaching Honor, honorary degrees will be handed out, as well as Speaker Researcher Award. All ceremonies at the U of L are open to the public and are free to attend. Police in Calgary say a house explosion that killed 2 people last weekend was a case of domestic-related homicide. Officials say the father deliberately set the fire that killed his 22-year-old daughter Dorsa and left his other 15-year-old daughter Dorna with life-threatening injuries. Police say Haydar Didardi had been fighting with his daughters before setting the blaze. He was also killed in the explosion, but police say it is unclear if he planned to take his own life. As the opioid crisis rages in our province, the city of Red Deer is being proactive. Red Deer City Council approved a motion to develop a strategy to clean up dirty needles around the city. The resolution says the province is the source of needle distribution and therefore should fund its cleanup. Red Deer received an $80,000 provincial grant last year to help with needle cleanup efforts. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer is vowing if he's elected Prime Minister this fall, he would put an end to illegal border crossers in Canada. In his latest speech, Scheer outlined his vision for immigration in Canada in a series of pre-election policy announcements.
In a few months, when our next federal election campaign begins, each party will release a platform full of ideas and options for voters to consider. And I would like to share some of those in a general way with you today. As Prime Minister, I will work to immediately restore fairness, order, and compassion in our immigration system. I will safeguard and emphasize economic immigration. I will stand up for families and ensure that spouses and children can be reunited. We will improve language training to ensure greater proficiency in English or French and newcomers' ability to succeed economically and socially. I will ensure that our system prioritizes people facing true persecution, focus government sponsorship on the victims of the 4 atrocity crimes, and restore integrity to our system by supporting the consistent application of fair rules.
South of the border, Robert Mueller has resigned as special counsel. He says he believed he was constitutionally barred from charging U.S. President Donald Trump with a crime, but pointed out that his Russia report did not exonerate the president.
The order appointing me special counsel authorized us to investigate actions that could obstruct the investigation. And we conducted that investigation, and we kept the office of the acting Attorney General apprised of the progress of our work. And as set forth in the report, after that investigation, if we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime. The introduction to the Volume 2 of our report explains that decision.
The Mississippi flood has entered its 4th month with no end in sight. Residents are struggling to save their homes, and some farmers realize that they're not able to do anything when it comes to planting this year.
This year I have planned on planting corn, and I did not get a chance to do so because the water started rising back in February, and we did not get an opportunity. I got the land ready, but I didn't get a chance to get it planted before the water started rising back in February.
A vicious storm tore through the Kansas City area, spawning tornadoes that downed trees and power lines. The storm also damaged many homes and injured at least 12 people.
Well, I'm feeling pretty sad right now. I don't have a home right now to go to right now. We seen it on TV that it was coming, and we seen the path, and so we decided to all leave. And we waited it out, and then we came back, and this is what we come back to.
4 people were killed and 8 others were injured in a crash involving a church van in Virginia. Officials say the van was carrying 11 people and was turning into a church parking lot last night when it was struck by a pickup truck. The van flipped several times. The number of new diabetes cases among adults in North America keeps falling, even as obesity rates rise. Health officials are not sure why.
It's a new report that shows that diabetes diagnoses are dropping. The number of new diabetes cases each year has been going down for almost 10 years. And that's puzzling because diabetes is very closely associated with obesity, and obesity's been going up. This was done by researchers at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta. They think one explanation is that in the late 1990s, they changed the definition of what counts as diabetes. They expanded it, so people who didn't used to be counted as diabetic were. And for a while, for at least 10 years, that meant more and more people who in the past wouldn't have been counted as diabetic were added to the numbers. But when they did that expansion, they were catching cases that had been out there that hadn't been diagnosed before. And they think that all that settled out after about a decade went by. So as the new cases were diagnosed, say from 2011 on, it wasn't finding old cases that had been out there and now are being added because of the new definition. It's just legitimately new cases. So they think that that rise may have petered out, and that may be part of what happened.
The Edmonton Oilers have a new head coach. The club's GM, Ken Holland, announced that Dave Tippett will be the team's new bench boss.
I'm here today to introduce the next head coach of the Edmonton Oilers, Dave Tippett. I started the search 3 weeks ago, today actually, when I was named the general manager of the Edmonton Oilers. The first thing that I did was reach out to Ken Hitchcock. Basically, I put together a list of about 15 to 17 candidates. Most of them had history, experience of being an NHL head coach. Dave was always the leading candidate in my mind. I'm big on experience. Dave has coached in the National Hockey League for over 1,000 games behind the bench. I believe when you're in the National Hockey League, there's always some choppy waters, and certainly having somebody behind the bench that's been through those before, it's a positive.
I come to a team here that obviously has good pieces, lots of upside, and everybody talks about McDavid and Draisaitl. There's more pieces here than McDavid and Draisaitl. There's good players here to build on.
It's hard to think about hockey with summer-like weather today we experienced, and the mercury will be climbing even more this week. Complete weather details are coming up. Sunny and warm again today. Tonight mainly clear with a low near 10 degrees. Tomorrow just a few clouds and a high near 28. Friday a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 25. A beautiful weekend is shaping up. Saturday the mercury will climb to 29. Sunday blue skies and a high near 27. Pretty much the same picture on Monday. Tuesday cooling off slightly to 23 degrees. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 20 and an average low of 6. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1986 at 32 degrees, and the record low was 0 in 1989. Sunrise was at 5:31, sunset at 9:26. Let's have a look at the national forecast for tomorrow now. Victoria will be mainly sunny at 22, Vancouver partly cloudy at 20. Expect lots of clouds and a high near 25 in Calgary on Thursday. Mainly sunny at 25 as well in Edmonton. Sunshine and a hot 31 degrees for Regina. Sunny and 29 for Saskatoon tomorrow. Lots of sunshine and 28 degrees for Winnipeg. A mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 21 for Toronto. A chance of thunder showers and high of 22 degrees in Ottawa. Montreal will also have showers and 22. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have sunshine and 19. Halifax, Nova Scotia will be mostly cloudy and 11. Charlottetown, PEI will be partly cloudy and 16. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect sun mixed with cloud and a high near 11 degrees tomorrow. A Court of Quebec judge has ruled that SNC-Lavalin Group is headed to trial on charges of fraud and corruption. The decision is the latest step in criminal proceedings that began last fall after the company failed to secure a deferred prosecution agreement. It is kind of a plea deal that would have seen the firm pay a fine rather than face prosecution.
Will be hyper-scrutinized. We have now 2 proceedings before the courts, and therefore I won't say anything about a DPA. As to the possibility, I would invite you just to take a look at the law. The law is clear, but I'm not going to comment on the law because as Attorney General, anything that I say at this stage might be interpreted or might be capable of being interpreted as an indication of the direction in which I may or may not be going, and so I won't say anything.
I think one of the things that is very clear is that we respect the independence of our judiciary, and we're not going to comment on an ongoing court case. But as I've said many times, we're always going to try and fight for Canadian jobs in ways that uphold the rule.
The Bank of Canada has left its key interest rate unchanged, even though it says the economy is rebounding from its recent slump. The bank says the oil sector is rebounding, the national housing market is stabilizing, and job growth remains strong. It says recent data also pointed to growth in consumer spending and business investment. The bank, however, did warn that the economy still faces expanding trade risks following international conflicts and Chinese restrictions on Canadian goods. Lawmakers want Ottawa to better support farmers who they say are more at risk of mental problems such as stress, depression, and suicidal thoughts. A new report has made 10 recommendations. They include ensuring the government considers and addresses any potential effects new policies will have on agricultural producers. The report also recommends awareness campaigns to deal with cases of intimidation, cyberbullying, and threats farmers face. The MPs say farmers deal with many challenges, including market volatility, debt, long workdays, and unpredictable weather. Farm cash receipts for Canadian farmers were up 3% to almost $16 billion. The increase was attributed to higher program payments, crop and livestock receipts. Farm cash receipts were up in almost every province except for Manitoba, Ontario, and Nova Scotia. Cannabis receipts, which now include recreational cannabis, totaled $271 million in the first quarter and are now included in farm cash receipts. Wheat receipts were up by 13%, lentil was up 45%, and canola was down 11% as the Chinese import ban has had a major impact. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the UCP government says it has distributed more than $4.2 million in emergency payments for people driven from their homes by the devastating Northern Alberta wildfires. Many evacuees, however, say they're still waiting for their preloaded debit cards. Each adult evacuee is entitled to a one-time payment of $1,250, while children will receive $500. The fire has grown to over 130,000 hectares and is still considered out of control. Political journalist Brian Lilly is coming up with details of why Federal Environment Minister Catherine McKenna is blaming Alberta Premier Jason Kenney for the high-level wildfires. See that interview next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Lethbridge Gutsy Walk for Crohn's and Colitis is taking place Sunday, June 2nd at Henderson Lake Park, Kiwanis Picnic Shelter. Registration begins at 10 a.m. with the walk starting at 11. To get a pledge form and to sign up, visit gutsywalk.ca or call 1-888-884-2232. Target Hunger is an annual food drive being held on Saturday, June 8th, and organizers are seeking volunteers to help drop off and collect the yellow bags throughout the city, along with sorting out food at the food banks on event day. Volunteers who want to help with drop-off and collection will need to have access to a vehicle. To sign up, visit targethungerlethbridge.com or call the Lethbridge Food Bank at 403-320-1879 or the Interfaith Food Bank at 403-320-8779. The annual Dragon Boat Festival is coming up June 21st to the 23rd in Lethbridge, and there are several opportunities for volunteers to get involved in this fun event. Organizers are looking for ride-side assistance, help with administration and t-shirt tents, and more. For more information on how to get involved and to sign up, visit lethbridgedragonfest.ca. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
As you heard on Bridge City News, former Liberal MPs Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott will run as independents in the upcoming federal election in October. Joining me now to talk about it is our political journalist, Brian Lilly. Brian, they had a chance to join Elizabeth May and the Green Party, but I guess it really didn't work out. And studies say if you're not affiliated with a party heading into an election, your chances of being reelected are pretty low at around 30%.
Yeah, and you're also at a disadvantage in terms of fundraising. This is something Jane Philpott was making clear on Monday. She was asking people for donations, but saying, look, I can't even give you a tax receipt. You can't get the tax credit, which is very generous. You donate to a federal politician affiliated with a party, you get a 75% tax return, Hal. So that means you give your local MP or your local challenger $100, you get $75 off your next tax bill. They can't offer that until the writ drops, until the election is officially underway. We know it's already underway. You know, Andrew Scheer is giving speeches on immigration policy, and Justin Trudeau is sending out Ahmed Hussein to denounce him. We know that the election campaign's underway, but it's not official. So they can't hand out tax receipts. They're at a disadvantage on so many fronts, but they are running as independents. If I were to, be a betting man, I would say at this point, I think Jody Wilson-Raybould has a stronger chance of being elected as an independent in Vancouver than Jane Philpott does in Markham-Stouffville. Markham-Stouffville is a swing riding. The Liberals squeaked by there, a few thousand votes last time, which sounds like a lot, but not in a sweep of Liberals going through the area. Her running, the Liberals running, the Conservatives could very well go to the Conservatives. Even though Jane Philpott was a very accomplished cabinet minister, Jody Wilson-Raybould, a bit more star material coming out of this. And Vancouver, well, it's a little crazy. So she could definitely win out there.
So, Brian, did the Conservatives or maybe Jagmeet Singh and the NDP reach out to Jody Wilson-Raybould or Jane Philpott?
Well, I don't think the Conservatives would be a fit for either of the two women, but they did talk about how they had spoken to Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, but they didn't talk to him very long, and it wasn't exactly a fit. They had more conversations with Elizabeth May and the Green Party, but in the end, they just felt like, no, let's do this as independents, and more power to them. I think either woman could be reelected. I just think it's more likely Jody Wilson-Raybould would be elected as an independent than Jane Philpott, but both women fully capable of pulling this off.
Brian, as you've seen, the out-of-control wildfires by high level here in northern Alberta are more than 100,000 hectares in size. And Federal Environment Minister Catherine McKenna, well, she was actually laying the blame to Jason Kenney. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, well, because he doesn't like the carbon tax and he'll be cutting things, and so therefore it's his fault. Correct me if I'm wrong, Hal, but Jason Kenney was just sworn in as Premier of Alberta last week, and the wildfires were already well underway. But the Environment Minister wants to lay this on climate change. She wants to, the wildfires that happen every year. We could have a debate of, are they more intense? Are they happening more frequently? But anybody that lives in northern Canada, be it northern Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, they're used to wildfires. They happen each and every year with varying degrees of intensity, depending on the year, depending on the weather factors. This year is a tough year for northern Alberta, but for her to turn around and try and lay the blame for this on Jason Kenney's opposition to the carbon tax is nothing short of political posturing, of overheated rhetoric, of trying to smear your opponents and scare people. And quite frankly, I've covered Catherine McKenna for a long time now. Quite frankly, it's beneath her.
Brian, there's word now that the federal Liberals want to put a tax on soda, on pop, plastics, and selling your home. I guess when it comes to taxes, it seems like the Trudeau Liberals like all of them.
Yeah, well, they're already running on a carbon tax, and we know that, and that's why Catherine McKenna is, trying to lay the blame for the wildfires on Jason Kenney. She's openly talked about a plastics tax, and this has been endorsed by the government. Yes, we need a tax on plastics. Well, wait a minute. Plastics are a byproduct of oil, therefore they're subject to the carbon tax, so they're already being taxed. Never mind, they want another tax just for plastics. Now there's this document out from the Ontario Liberal Caucus putting forward ideas. One of them calls for a tax on sugar-sweetened beverages, commonly called a soda tax, or, people kept yelling at me and saying, no one calls it soda in Canada, it's pop. Well, depends on where you live, actually. But either way, we all know what it is. They want a tax on that. But the crazy one, Hal, in my view, is a tax on selling your home. And this is an idea to deal with overheated, markets in Toronto and Vancouver specifically, and to deal with speculators. And they say, if you sell your home after 1 year, you'll pay a 50% capital gains tax. After 2 years, it goes down to 25, then 10, then 15. Then after 5 years, you're still paying 5% to the government. Look, right now, you sell your personal residence, your primary residence. It's 100% tax-free. There's no capital gains tax on it. How are you dealing with speculators if after 5 years of living in a home, you decide you're going to move on up like the Jeffersons, and suddenly you got to pay 5%? I mean, that could be tens of thousands of dollars, depending on what kind of home and what your down payment was, how much you were able to pay off in that time, how much it's appreciated. You could be paying tens of thousands of dollars to the government to deal with so-called speculators in let's say where you are in Lethbridge because the market in Toronto is overheated. No, that's just a tax grab.
Close to $600 million will be dished out to various media outlets in a federal bailout package. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer was not happy to hear that Unifor will be involved in determining who gets the cash.
I'm not happy to hear that Unifor will be a member of that panel, that they're going to be involved in that. And I'll tell you how, full disclosure, I am a member of Unifor. It's part of the terms of my employment at the Toronto Sun. I have to be a member of this union. Whether I want to be or not does not matter. I have to be a member. And this union, which represents thousands of media members in mainstream outlets across the country, is putting everyone in an awkward position because have you seen the photo of Jerry Diaz saying he's the resistance and Andrew Scheer's worst nightmare? Have you seen the ad campaign that they're backing from a group called Engage Canada that takes on Andrew Scheer? It's very partisan, it's anti-conservative, it's pro-liberal, and they're going to be on the panel, or at least pick somebody to go on the panel and decide which media outlets get the money. Andrew Scheer is right to call this out. Many journalists have called this out and said this is wrong, that this, the whole scheme actually puts the independence of the media in question. So this is a boneheaded move by the Liberals, but they're defending it. And Justin Trudeau this week, when questioned about it, has said, well, we believe in an independent media, not like the Conservatives who want to sell off CBC. I wish they wanted to sell off CBC. They don't. But, this is his defense. And even CBC, to their credit, have called out the Trudeau government on this and said, how can you put this organization, which has been so partisan, on the panel? And all they keep coming back to is, we believe in an independent media. But you can't be independent if one of the groups deciding if you get the money is out there campaigning for one side over the other.
And speaking of the CBC, if elected Prime Minister in the fall, Andrew Scheer says he will want to ensure that the CBC is telling more Canadian stories. It's understandable with the public broadcaster's appeared obsession with U.S. President Donald Trump and American politics.
Yeah, if you remember back a few years ago, CBC took a lot of flack because they bought the rights in Canada to shows like Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune, two very popular game shows that would air after the 6 o'clock news. And critics were going, well, wait a minute, how is this a good use of $1 billion plus year subsidy? You're bringing in American game shows, and now we'll go back to doing Canadian stories, and that's what we do. We tell Canadian stories. They have become as obsessed with Donald Trump. Well, not quite as obsessed as CNN, but almost. And Andrew Scheer says if he's elected prime minister, he's not going to sell them off like Justin Trudeau claims, but he will say, look, you want this money so that you can tell Canadian stories. Actually tell Canadian stories. There have been times, Hal, when I have been watching CBC News and they have spent more time on a frivolous American story that involves Donald Trump than on serious public policy issues or scandals involving the Trudeau government. And that is simply wrong. Again, you have to wonder about the independence of the media, though, because who gave them an extra few $100 million a year or an extra few $100 million when they were first elected? Justin Trudeau. You talk to reporters on the Hill and say, when was the last time CBC broke a hard story against the Trudeau government? There's going to be an awful lot of people scratching their heads.
The new trade deal between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico is getting closer to becoming a reality after the tariffs on both steel and aluminum products were partially lifted, Brian.
Yeah, and you can only say partially because the Americans have actual language in the deal with Mexico that is effectively a tariff, or at least a quota, that if you go above the quota, the tariffs kick back in. The language is a little bit more nuanced with Canada, but a lot of people are now questioning and saying, wait a minute, did we actually get a win, or are we accepting quotas? Because if we have a free trade deal, if we have a trade deal with the Americans, why are we taking quotas? But it looks like we are taking quotas by another name for both steel and aluminum in order to get the tariffs lifted. So this is not the win that the Trudeau Liberals were putting forward. They said the tariffs had to go as a precondition of ratifying NAFTA, or the USMCA. A lot of Republicans and Democrats in the United States said the same thing. They did not want this trade deal going forward. They would not vote for it if it were not, if the tariffs were not dealt with. The Trump administration put forward a proposal. We've accepted it. Now, as details start to emerge, a lot of questions about whether it's even actually a good deal for Canada.
Canada's made a claim for the North Pole, which is being disputed by both Russia and Denmark. Tell me more about that.
This has been an ongoing international competition for several years. It goes back to before the last election. And the former Harper government had put forward a major claim. And, you know, even when some Canadian scientists started saying, well, no, I think this, the Harper guys said no. They brought in different scientists and they brought in historians. And they're like, no, the North Pole is ours. We need to lay claim to this. Because Russia wants to go in and completely develop it. Denmark, not so much, but they probably develop it more than the Trudeau Liberals would. But I remember before the last election, Trudeau was asked about this, and he said, I'll just leave it up to the experts. He was asked, does the North Pole belong to Canada? I'll leave it up to the experts. Well, you have to decide who the experts are in Canada that you're going to listen to. Since he's been in government, he's obviously heard from enough of the bureaucrats to say, no, Canada must make this claim. Because if we do not, if we are not part of the group that controls the North Pole, then that will be wide open for resource development in ways that most Canadians probably wouldn't be on board with. I don't see Vladimir Putin having an awful lot of concern for the environment. If he finds that there's oil down there, he'll drill for it any way he can, environment be damned.
Malaysia is now joining the Philippines in demanding that Canada take back its garbage.
Yeah, I didn't know that we were a major exporter of garbage, but by the way, Canada's not alone in this. This started several years ago when China started saying, you can't send us your garbage anymore. You can't send us container ships full of plastics or garbage. And of course, we've watched this fight with the Philippines developed over the last little while. There were adult diapers in this waste that was supposed to be recyclables. And it turns out it wasn't. You know, it was shipped under false premises to the Philippines. And they said to Canada, you got to take it back. Well, at first they were dealing with the private company. The private company said no. Then they said to the government, you got to take it back. The government was dragging its feet saying, it's not really our fault. We didn't send it. And that's a fair point for the Trudeau Liberals. They didn't send it. But eventually, the Duterte government in the Philippines said, you take it back or I'm going to sail it over to Canada and drop it off. He got a win. The Canadian government said, we'll bring back, I forget how many containers it was. We'll bring them all back. We'll dispose of it here. Now it turns out that some companies have been doing the same thing in Malaysia, and they're now making similar noises, similar threats against Canada and a bunch of other countries. So again, we're not alone in this. This is not the government shipping over the garbage, I want to point out. These are private, unscrupulous companies telling whoever's accepting it at the other end, oh, it's this, and it turns out to be that, and nobody wants that. So expect another fight over the next little while to try and get this solved.
Let me ask you something. Is there an official apology coming from Ottawa?
The official garbage policy apology of 2019? Not that I've heard of yet. Not yet.
One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me from Toronto. Thanks again, Brian.
Thank you.
Spring is here, and many people are itching to get their gardens going, along with planting flowers, trees, and shrubs. Now, there's a right way and a wrong way of doing these things, so we thought we'd enlist an expert today. Karen Barby's the co-owner of Greenhaven Garden Centres here in Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News, Karen.
Well, thank you for having me here.
Tell me a bit about Greenhaven. It's been around a long time, hasn't it?
Yes, it's about 42 years now.
Wow.
But it started out small it's easier for us to do it that way, and just growing, and we thoroughly enjoy letting everybody have a great chance with gardening.
Now, when it comes to planting veggies, I'm a big fan of cucumbers and tomatoes, and they actually thrive in our environment, don't they?
They do. They love our heat. They love our sunshine, and we can certainly look after them quite well. There's lots of varieties that grow here.
And peppers too, do they thrive
Peppers
as
do. You don't see quite the same as the big sweet ones that come out of California, but we can grow some pretty nice peppers.
Now, how about veggies that have to be planted a little bit later because they're more sensitive? Let's talk a bit about those.
Those would be peppers, tomatoes, cucumbers, the squash family. Can't stand it too cold, so we're just right on target now for getting those plants in the ground.
Now, is it true that if you seed several times throughout the spring, maybe every 10 days or so, you can prolong your harvest of baby vegetables and the tender greens too?
You can. Those would be more things like lettuce, spinach, radishes, up to a certain point. I don't know too many people that would do something like peas or beans, do that successive seeding, it's called. Carrots. Carrots are another one, though, that they do too.
What are some of the veggies that maybe have a tough time in southwestern Alberta?
Oh, the ones.
As hard as we try.
Yes,
right?
The ones that need a long time. We get some dedicated people. They try things like okra. We sell peanut seeds, believe it or not, to grow a peanut plant. We don't grow the plants themselves, but needs a long, long growing season. We don't quite have that. And we have the cool night still. So that they need that hotter nighttime temperature to keep going.
What's the best way to really garden our soil, like really prepare it properly?
Oh, I just love it when people can fix the soil up first before they start planting. Compost is excellent. Manures like the composted sheep manure, compost steer manure, great. We have a new soil, it's called a fish soil.
Oh.
So yes, it's made from fish and sort of wood fines, it's called. And it's beautiful dark soil, and tomatoes especially love that because they like an acidic type of soil. So anything that you can do to get the soil good before you plant makes a bonus.
So when we have that compost in the side of the yard, dig up some of that compost and put it right in, mix it in with the soil?
Yeah. And just mix it around for the plant. You don't have to fill in the whole garden area, but make sure you get that plant area so that the roots are going to take it right away.
Any advice, Karen, on naturally controlling our weeds and preventing the bugs from destroying a lot of our vegetation?
Well, weeds are part of our whole makeup, it seems like. The weeds that we do have, you end up pulling them is the easiest way when they're small. Chemicals are not a good idea, especially in a vegetable garden. There is a couple of organic weed sprays, one that will work in lawns that won't kill your lawn, that's iron-based, and the other one is in your vegetable garden and it's vinegar-based. So it's not like straight vinegar, but you still have to be careful you don't get it on your good plants. And anything to do with insects, you just watch. When you have healthy soil, healthy plants, and good air movement, don't put your plants too close together.
You know what's interesting about dandelions? Many years ago, there was dandelion soup, dandelion salads, a lot of nutritional value. Now people look at it as the enemy.
I know.
How times have changed, right?
Yeah, they really, and you can see it. And dandelions are a plant that introduced, and so they've sort of taken over. You keep mowing them. Digging is probably still the best way, but it then tends to be a little bit backbreaking it too.
What's the best way to grow some nice, big, healthy tomatoes?
Oh, they love that soil. So, and fertilizer, we sell a lot of different kinds of fertilizer, organic fertilizers. They need constant water, so just moist. They don't like to dry out. They don't like to be in too much shade, so a lot of sunshine. We get people that are successful with them growing them in pots, in containers, in a potting soil, but then really regular watering for those. And yeah, weekly fertilizing. We sell a fertilizer spike that's already compressed fertilizer that you can stick it right beside your plant.
Fertilizer with an attitude.
Yeah, and it fertilizes all season long, so that's another great way to do it.
How about the varieties of tomatoes? Does it matter?
Oh, it doesn't matter, but you know, it seems to be easier to grow the cherry tomatoes. They don't have as many problems. You get hundreds, but there's just, everybody has their own personal favorite.
And they're like candy. You just pop them right in, right? Yeah. It's wonderful.
Yeah, there's one called Sweet Million, and it is. It's just as sweet as candy.
How about growing a healthy strawberry patch? And maybe raspberries too.
Yes, they both do well here. They actually don't mind the cool springs, so they're doing really good this time of year. Again, water for them, because strawberries, the fruit, are all water. So water, really critical to water June, July. To fill
Like first thing in the morning, watering?
Yeah,
or?
it's nice if you can. Not everybody can, but at least when you water the root system and not get water all over the leaves. Most of our plants don't like to be watered on the leaf. If you're watering in the morning, then the leaf dries out throughout the day. And so a good heavy water is a better way to do it than a light sprinkle.
I'm a big fan of rhubarb pie, like rhubarb, strawberry rhubarb pie.
Yes.
That rhubarb, you can't kill it. You can rip it out, you can pour gas and burn it. It keeps coming back. Why is it so hardy?
It's the toughest root there is, I think.
Yeah.
Again, it loves our soil. We do have I tend to have a clay kind of a soil. It can handle a little bit more manure added to it. Doesn't like it too hot though. Some people have actually killed their rhubarb.
What?
Because they had it in too hot of a place, but not too many. And it just produces really well here.
What are the do's and don'ts when it comes to growing beautiful rose bushes?
Roses like to have a lot of sun, so we're very good at that. We have good sunshine. I find they do better if they face east or if they face south because they're getting the full sun. They don't particularly like the really strong west wind. And we now have hardy roses as well as tender roses. Tender are the ones that you have to protect for the winter, and you bury the root, the graft, you bury it 4 inches below the soil level.
Now, you're a big fan of trees, like a lot of us are, offer the shade. I love decorating them up at Christmas time with all the Christmas lights as well, like the blue spruce trees. When is the best time to plant the evergreen and spruce trees?
You can plant trees actually that are in pots, container grown, the whole growing season. So from end of April when they're available until the end of October, till the ground freezes. Just that you do have to do a little bit different work for planting later on in the season. You have to make sure that it's well protected for the winter. Doesn't have quite as strong a root system. In the springtime, when we're planting in May into June, they have time to get roots on them.
How about people that like to plant pine trees, and then there's the pine beetle infestation, the problem there?
Yeah, that's more of a northern Alberta problem because it's more of lodgepole pine, and we don't have lodgepole pine growing that much in the city. Waterton is also a concern. They do, and they have had that pine beetle attack them.
How big of a hole should we actually plant when it comes to trees?
Well,
you know, how deep
yes,
and how wide?
Yeah, it's
the diameter?
I always thought that you should go like really big, really deep, but now they're finding that you're better to go about 1.5 times the size of the container it's in, width-wise, and only a little bit deeper. The root system, you want to make sure that the tree is introduced to some of its original soil, but still adding compost, peat moss, manure, in those forms to help loosen up our clay soil, but not make it so fine that the roots don't want to leave home and go out to the other soil.
Can we accidentally overwater because we want the roots to actually take root, right, and dig deep, so they're not dwarfed and just kind of like, I'm just going to stay here. I like being watered every second day.
Yes, we can, and that actually makes a very weak plant. We've seen a bit of problem with that. The overwatering is more so what we're seeing is when people have underground sprinklers and they're turning them on more and keeping those trees actually too wet.
How about leafy trees and shrubs? When's the best time to plant those?
Those, same thing.
Yeah.
The little bit trickier in July and August if it's really hot, as it was last summer. You do need to plant actually evening. So you do your planting, get everything ready in the heat of the day if you can, and then actually physically plant the tree towards evening after supper. Has all night to get over the shock of being planted, because those leaves will take moisture, the roots will take moisture from the leaf to compensate for being disturbed.
What's the best age of tree that we can plant? Is there any age? Like you can take a full-grown tree as seedling? What would you recommend? Somewhere in between?
Somewhere in between. Seedling has to, it dries out more, but it takes a little bit more care to get it established. A larger tree takes longer time to regain its roots. So a medium-sized tree in a pretty good-sized pot, you see that growth happening in the future years really quick. The roots will take easier on a smaller tree, and then so the tree will actually grow more consistently.
What are some of the hardier tree varieties that we have here in southwestern Alberta? So we don't have to worry about maybe more low maintenance, just let them do their thing. They like it dry and hot.
Well, our native tree actually is the cottonwood poplar.
Oh.
Yeah, the trees that are growing in the river bottom here, those would be the native trees. So seedless cottonwood poplar is called a sergeant poplar. So it's a male tree, doesn't get the seed, the cotton. So you don't get the mess, but you get
I was going to say for people who have allergies,
tree,
right?
Yes, you don't get that mess, but you get this massive tree that most homeowners don't have room for now. So we are looking at using more trees that can handle our drought conditions. That would be along the lines of green ash. A lot of the flowering crabapple, Mayday trees are good. Choke cherries, there's choke cherries as well, and they can all handle this kind of temperatures that we have.
How about trees that the root system likes to seek out water lines?
As in willow?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because some homeowners are concerned about that, what they're planting on their property.
Yeah.
Because down the road, it may cause some damage, right?
It can. The willows will look for the easiest way though, so they're not going to wrap themselves around roots. But if you had a wood basement, you'd want to be careful with the willow. And if you have to make sure that you deep water that tree to begin with to set the roots deep. And if you're a person that likes to water lots, then a willow's a perfect tree.
You know what I've noticed since I moved to southwestern Alberta? I see so many of my neighbors, they have rock lawns, gravel on their lawns instead of actual grass because of how hot it gets here in the summertime, right? Yeah. But for those of us that do prefer grass, when is the best time and how much should we water?
Well, they always say that the best amount of water is about 1 inch a week. Okay. So we had 1 inch of rain, I believe, last on the weekend, sort of. So you could look at it, I don't need to water again until Saturday. And if you have a sprinkler system, sometimes they go on 3 times a week, but they're set so they give you about 1 inch of water a week. And it makes the grass stay very green. For those people that don't have the irrigation or don't want to water that much, the grass won't die, it just isn't quite as green in areas.
So which variety of grass is the hardiest or will really flourish here? Kentucky bluegrass or?
It's actually a finer grass and needs more moisture, more water, but the red fescue, the creeping red fescues are the grasses that can take more drought.
Now, when it comes to mowing the lawn, Karen, as well, some people like to, I only want to mow my lawn maybe once every 2 weeks or whatever, and they cut it really short. But the danger with that is that you can actually burn your lawn, right?
Yes, you can scalp. I call that scalping, but
right.
Yeah, and then because the sun comes out and it actually burns right through the lawn, right to the roots and causes some damage.
So how short should we go?
You should go about 2 inches, so it'd be about 5 centimeters or so.
How about quackgrass?
Oh, quackgrass is not my favorite. Oh, that's one thing that is always a challenge. Quackgrass spreads by root, so if you try and dig it or pull it, you're actually encouraging it.
Wow.
Yes, and I have to say that this is the time that I talk about Roundup. As quackgrass and Roundup will kill it, but it'll kill any grass. But if you can get the root system killed with the Roundup, you don't have it coming back.
Tell me about some of the rewards. I mean, you've been with Greenhaven Garden Center over 40 years now. What do you enjoy most about working there?
Oh, I love the plants, and I love the people that come in and visit us about the plants. I just love everything to do with all kinds of new plants.
Does anybody ever throw you a curveball? You're like, I don't know how to quite answer that.
Oh,
I'll have to do some research and get back to you, or have you seen it all already?
No,
Or
no,
heard it
I see
all?
that daily.
Oh.
Daily. There's still questions and things, and gotta find out. Not sure about that one.
I'll get back to you, right?
Yeah, yes.
Awesome. Karen Barbie, co-owner with Greenhaven Garden Centre in Lethbridge, thanks a lot for joining me in studio today.
Thank you, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.